all I can say is Cherokee County, y'all are stalwart. 3 hours of a GOP committee or a GOP meeting on a Saturday morning, that is very, very impressive. I come in about 8:15, it was about 8:45, and I'm asking the chairman what's kind of the flow and all that. He says, well, we got 4 speakers, you're the last one. And I said, well, how long am I going to have to speak? You'll have an hour to speak. I'm like, holy crap. I don't know if y'all want to hear from me for that long, but again, thank y'all so much for coming out and spending the amount of time that you're spending today to get to know the candidates so that you can make a good, educated decision on who are going to be the leaders of our state here in Georgia. What I thought I would do this morning, just kind of tell you a little bit about myself, about who I am, about what got me here, and some of the ideas, principles that I want to take to the governor's office. First of all, I'm married. I have a beautiful wife and family. I don't know if y'all heard the little one kind of screaming and crying a little bit in the back. That is my daughter. So I apologize if it was bugging anybody, but my wife actually took her outside. I have a 20-year-old, an 18-year-old, 14-year-old, and then a little 9-month-old. I'm very blessed today that my mom is joining us today. She's here back in the back. Thanks, Mom, for coming out and supporting me. And that's her husband, Dan, standing up in the back as well. As I've traveled the state, I've been able to meet tons of amazing, wonderful people. We have a beautiful state, and I get asked 2 questions everywhere I go. The first one is, Michael, you seem like a nice guy. You got some good ideas. We have little flyers out there that you can read kind of what some of our policy positions are. But how are you going to beat the establishment? How are you going to beat a guy that's been in office for almost a quarter of a century, who has the backing of the Georgia Chamber of Commerce, all the lobbyists? How are you going to be able to overcome that? Well, I share with them a story about how I got my first position here as a state senator in Forsyth County. Relatively new to politics. I was not involved beforehand, and I was running against a long-time entrenched rhino. He'd been down there for years. Again, he had the backing of the establishment. We went out there, we knocked on over 20,000 doors. We made thousands of phone calls. We ended up beating him 66 to 34%. It was one of the worst beatdowns in Georgia history. So we're used to being kind of on the backside of a challenge and overcoming that. So we've been able to go out there around the state. Also, one of the things I like to share with people is that I was the first elected official here in Georgia to come out and publicly endorse Donald Trump for president. Back in September of 2015. Thank you. When I first came out and announced, I didn't get applauses. I get all kind of those strange looks and all that, because people were like, what the heck are you doing? Why are you supporting this guy? But again, I traveled the state. I was a surrogate for him, traveling across the country, campaigning for a guy who people thought had no chance of winning. So we're used to being in this position, and every single time we've come out victorious. Once people kind of get content that we can win, that we have a chance of winning, the next question is, Michael, you have a lot of really good, strong conservative positions. How are you actually going to implement them? Because, again, we see with President Trump, he is getting opposition from the media, from the liberals, even sometimes members of his own party. He is having to fight tooth and nail. Had any other president won and gone through what he's gone through, they'd probably be hiding in the bushes somewhere. He has had a battle and a half. They're like, Michael, how are you going to be able to withstand a lot of those pressures whenever you're out there implementing some of these policies? Well, I want to share just a couple of stories with you again about what actually makes me who I am. One of them starts when I was about 7 years old. I was a Christmas baby. I was born a week or so before Christmas, and we woke up one Saturday morning, and my mom, she brings me, and I've got 3 siblings, and she sits us down on the couch, and her mom was there, but my dad, he was noticeably absent. And my mom tries to explain to her 4 children that their father is sick. Not a physical sick, he didn't have a stroke or a heart attack or anything like that, but a mental sick. You see, my dad served in Vietnam. He came back and he was diagnosed bipolar, manic depression, and I believe he suffered from PTSD. And I didn't learn this that morning, it was later on in life, but I found out that the night before, My father had actually tried to kill himself as well as our entire family. And that morning, that day, that event, it forever changed my life. That Christmas, my family, we didn't spend it in the den, in the fireplace, to open up Christmas presents. We spent it visiting my father in a mental home. And I'd come home from school sometimes, and my dad, he'd have this little bell he loved to ring, and he'd be out in the middle of the street singing Life's a Joke, sometimes having little kids following around him. Other days, I'd come home from school and I'd find him in the closet, in the fetal position, terrified because somebody or something was out to get him. And the way that I kind of got used to that environment was anytime he'd come home from work, I was always right there at the door. As he's walking in, I'd say, "Dad, how are you feeling today?" And based upon his response, I could gauge how I was supposed to behave and act. Well, my mom, she is a saint. She's fabulous. She's wonderful. As because of her and her strength, she was able to kind of keep us together, keep us all safe. But when I was 14 years old, I wanted to go to a church camp. And this church camp was several hundred miles away. And my mom volunteered to take me and several other people from our church to this camp. And when they got home, my little brother and sister, they run into the house and they find my dad on the bottom of the stairs with a picture of our family in one hand and a suicide note lying on the table. And he died. Like any 14-year-old who lost their father in that way, I went through all kinds of grief, of self-doubt, of self-worth. Was I the reason my father died? Had I not gone to that camp, could my mom have been there to protect him? What was my life worth living if my father wasn't willing to live? And I remember I was a senior in high school, and it was the third high school that I attended, and it was a very, very small school. We only had 20 people in the graduating class. You can see I'm a bigger guy, and I was pretty much forced to play all the sports. Whether I was good at it or not, I was on the field out there participating. And my senior year, we got a new track coach. The track coach, he sees me, he kind of sees my height, my legs, and he says, "Michael, I have got the race for you. I want you to run the 300-meter hurdles." I don't know if you have any track stars in the room, but that is one of the hardest races to run. Yeah. You have to sprint 300 meters, and all along the way, you have to jump over these hurdles. Well, again, small school, limited resources. We didn't have a track. What I had was a cow pasture. We didn't even have enough hurdles to make an entire track if we had one. We had 3 hurdles. So my practice was running around the cow pasture, running around jumping over these 3 hurdles over and over and over again. Well, come my first track meet, I see something that I had never before seen in real life. That's a track full of hurdles. I was excited, a little nervous, but I lined up that starting point ready to go. The gun goes off, and I shoot out neck and neck with all the other racers, at least for the first 3 hurdles. The 4th hurdle comes up, a leg catches the top of it, and bam, I fall flat on my face. The 5th hurdle, the 6th hurdle, the same thing. Here I am, 17 years old, a senior in high school. By now, all the other racers, they finished the race. I'm alone on this track. I'm embarrassed, I'm bruised, I'm hurting. I want to give up. I just want to quit. I want to be anywhere but on that track field. But before I can get that thought out of my mind, those hurdles that lay before me, they transformed. No longer were they made of metal or plastic and of wood, but they represented the trials, the heartache, the struggles that I've had throughout my 17 years of life. And I got up and I finished the race. But in finishing the race, I still knocked over every single one of the remaining hurdles. Every single one. I crossed the finish line, I look behind me, and there's this sea of fallen hurdles. I don't know if you have any sports enthusiasts that love to watch sports movies. You know, and in the movies, you see this kid out there struggling on the athletic field. They finish the game or whatever it is, and they get a standing ovation. Well, that doesn't happen. I crossed that finish line, and there is nobody there. Not even my coach. Tapped me on the back, tell me I did a good job, nothing. In fact, I go up the top of the stands, just kind of sitting there in isolation, just taking in what just happened. In a poem by William Ernest Henley called Invictus comes to mind. In this poem, he talks about how I am the captain of my fate, the master of my soul. And that event forever instilled within me that I am not a product of what happens to me. I make and determine my own future and my own actions. And that's really missing a lot in politics. We have so many people that react to things, that don't actually take the lead and make things happen. Well, I've been able to use that experience several times throughout my life, whether it's marriage, whether it's starting my own business, whether it's politics, whatever it might be. There's one more story I want to share with you. I'm a CPA, small business owner. You guys ever heard of Sport Clips Haircut? Kind of ESPN, which is the barbershop. I owned 18 of those. I had 160 employees. Ended up selling it primarily due to Obamacare. But the very first store that I owned, I bought it. And it had an existing manager that I wanted to keep. And I wanted to do an object lesson. I paid about $150,000 for this store. And I wanted to get $150,000 in cash, set it in front of the manager, kind of do an object lesson so that she knew, she could touch, she could feel the value of what I was turning over to her. So I go to the bank. I write a check, $150,000. I give it to the teller. The teller looks at the check, looks back up at me, looks back down the check, goes get the branch manager. Branch manager comes over to me and says, Mr. Williams, we understand that you have $150,000 in your account. However, the bank doesn't have that much money here. I'm like, okay, how much money do you have? It's like, well, we can't tell you that. What we can do is we can order an armed truck, we can fill out a bunch of paperwork, and we can charge you $10,000 to $15,000 to get this money here. I'm like, no, I don't want to do that. How much money can you give me? Well, I can't tell you that either. So, well, can you give me $100,000? No, we can't give you $100,000. Can you give me $50,000? No, I can't give you $50,000. Can you give me $5,000? Give me $5,000. Say, sure. So I get $5,000. I leave that branch. I go to another branch. This time I write a check out for $145,000. Almost the exact same things happens, except I walk out of that branch with $10,000. So I go to all these branches, get $150,000 in cash, go sit down with my branch manager or the store manager, do the object lesson. And I go back to the original branch I started from, give them the $150,000 cash, say, now you have it. But you know what? They charged me. They actually charged me to take my money and deposit it. Well, 2008 rolls around. I need another large sum of cash. I remember what happened, so I do the same thing all over again. Well, 6 months, 9 months later, I get a letter in the mail from the IRS. They want to audit me. I'm like, sure, come on in. Again, I'm a CPA. I don't have anything to hide. I welcome them into my office. I give them access to my bank statements, financial reports, anything and everything they want, I give them access to. They spend about a week going through everything. They leave. Then they want to go audit my mom. I'm not really quite sure why they want to do that, but they go to audit my mom. And they leave. I don't hear anything from them. About 9 months later, I get a call from a gentleman who is an agent with the U.S. Treasury Department. Like, Michael, we want to talk to you for a little bit. I'm like, sure. They come down to their field office. He sits me down and he says, Michael, we believe that you have committed a felony. I'm like, okay, what did I do? I'm not aware of any felony I committed. Long and short of it is basically I took my own money out of my own account for my own business, but I didn't tell the government. And that is a felony. It's called structuring. Well, I explained to him why I did it. I wasn't trying to be deceivious, or I wasn't doing anything wrong. I reported my taxes. Everything's on the up and up. The bank wouldn't give me how much money I wanted. He understood that, and I said, okay, so am I free to go? I said, you're free to go. I said, well, is this done? I said, no, I've got to take it back to my superiors. Well, what am I going to know? He said, well, give us about 6 months. 6 months rolls around. A year rolls around. A year and a half rolls around. He calls me back. He says, Mike, I've got questions about the audit that happened now over 2.5 years ago. I walk him through all of that. He says, okay, so what about the structure? We agree with that. I said, no, not yet. Another year and a half later, he calls me up and he says, Michael, you need an attorney because we're going to charge you with structure. I was like, holy crap. How am I going to work this out? So I find an attorney. We go down, we sit with him and the prosecutor. And they basically tell me, Michael, you have 2 options. You can confess. You can sign this plea deal and only go to jail for 3 years. And if you're good in jail, you might get out in a year and a half of good behavior. That's what's option number 2. They said, well, you can fight it, And people like you, we send to jail all the time for 10 years. So take your pick. I was like, I don't like either one of those. So we went back, I talked to my attorney, and we decided that, again, I am innocent, I didn't do anything wrong, and we are going to fight. I call up the prosecutor, the agent, I tell them that. You think they were happy to hear that? No, it makes their job harder. They actually not have to work. So we fight them, and at this point in time, I had not yet been indicted. I don't recommend it to anybody, but it's really easy to get an indictment on somebody. They say you can indict a ham sandwich. The reason is, in the indictment process, you have a grand jury, but only the prosecutor presents the case. The defendant, they don't even show up. They're not allowed to show up. So the prosecutor is there presenting their case to the grand jury. Well, my attorney, worth every dime I paid him, he convinced the prosecutor to at least tell the grand jury our side of the story. And he agreed to that. And the grand jury came back with what's called a no bill. What that means is I was completely innocent of any and all wrongdoing. I was excited. I was happy. I thought, okay, good, we can finally put that, and that chapter, close it up and move on. They were mad. They were upset that I got off for not doing anything. Not a month later, I get another letter in the mail from the IRS saying that I owe them over $1 million in back taxes. I call them up, I'm like, what the heck are y'all talking about? How can y'all do this? They did, the audit took place, they go, like 8 years ago now, there's something called the statutes of limitations. Has that not expired on this? They said, well, Mr. Williams, as a matter of fact, yes, on one of the years it has, and we need you to waive your right, the statute of limitations. I said, no, I'm not going to do that. So well, before you say no, if you don't waive your right, we're going to charge you with fraud. Basically, they couldn't get me criminally, so they're trying to come after me civilly. I said, no, I'm not going to do that. But another year passes by. They call me back up again. They say, look, if you just agree to pay 2008 fines, we'll erase all of 2007. I said, y'all have not figured me out yet. I have not done anything wrong. You're not going to get me to admit that I've done something wrong. I'm a CPA. Let's take this thing to court. Another year. We're talking about 10 years now, from the very beginning to where we are now. We're about to go to court. I finally get my day in court, and I've been very adamant that I don't owe anything. I don't owe a dime to the IRS. And the agents, they wanted to kind of see what I had. So the night before, I'm sitting down with my attorneys. I'm going over everything. I've got stacks of paperwork. I can prove everything on my taxes. And by the time we're done, I'm looking at my attorney and say, look, we're going to go in this meeting, and when we leave tomorrow, I want the agents to know and understand that I don't owe a dime. The lead attorney, he looks at me and he says, Michael, I understand you're passionate about this. I understand that you're tired, you're fed up with all this, and you want this to be done. But I've been doing this for 35 years. Never once have I seen the IRS walk away from an alleged $1 million liability without you having to pay something. So if you want this to go away, get ready to write a check for something. I said, no, you don't understand me. We're going to prove to them I don't owe anything. He never believed me, but he at least said it. So I'm ready to go, and we sit down with these agents the next morning. So I don't know how much time with them, hour and a half, 2 hours. And by the time we're done, the agents, they lean back in their chair, they look at all the paperwork on the table, and they say, I don't think you have a tax liability. I said, you're damn right I don't have a tax liability. Can you give me all the money I spent all the years back of my life? No, I didn't actually say that. I wanted to, but I didn't. But yeah, we agreed. I didn't owe a penny. So we're walking back to the car. It's me and the lead attorney. He's got his head down, shaking his head. He looks up at me and he says, Michael, how would you do that? That's basically the same question that I'm asked as I travel the state. It's, Michael, how are you going to do that which most people think is impossible? How are you going to do that which most people can't conceive? They can't wrap their heads around it. How did you accomplish that? Well, in my life, there's been two things I've learned to help overcome these obstacles. One of them is there are going to be people all over the place. They're going to try to get in your head to tell you it can't be done. You're on a fool's errand. There's no point even trying. You've got to get those people out of your mind, get focused on what it is that you want to do, and be direct with it. The next thing is fear. There are so many people that are scared to be different, to stand up, to say the things that everybody's thinking but nobody wants to say. You have to overcome fear. I've shared with you guys. I lost my dad when I was 14 years old. About 2.5 years ago, my oldest son was in an accident. He laid on death's bed for 2 weeks. And through the grace of God and all the prayers that were offered, he's alive today. I've had my own government try to take away my rights, my liberties, and my properties. I am not scared. I am fed up with a government that continues to erode upon our rights, that's being led by politicians, elected officials that will stand up here in this very room, will tell you every single thing that you want to hear, but then get elected, go down there, and do something different. That is not who I am, and that is the candidate. That's the politicians that I am trying to fight against. I was the first elected official to come out and support Donald Trump back in September of 2015. When everybody else was running from him, I was running towards him because I knew while he can say some pretty off-the-wall things, he is not bought and paid for by lobbyists, by special interests, and big corporations that currently control our state and our nation. I am the only candidate in this race that is putting my own money, primarily financing my entire campaign and relying upon the hard-working Georgians to make their small dollar donations, which is $5, $10, $100, to help bring us across the finish line. In fact, the AJC, do we have any fans of the AJC in this room? They're good, because they hate my guts. They can't stand me. The very first disclosures that we had to do back in the summer of last year, they did a deep dive into all the disclosures, and they were rattling off all the big names, all the big wigs that were supporting my opponents. Then like, let's look and see who's supporting Michael Williams. And they actually make fun of some of my supporters, one of them being a bartender that can only afford to give $3. They say, look who is supporting Michael. I said, you're exactly right. Look at who is supporting me. It is the people of Georgia, not the special interests, big corporations, and the lobbyists. It's the people of Georgia. So this past disclosure cycle, it was in February, we actually beat the AJC to the punch. We did our disclosure, we put out a press release, and we said, we've gotten donations. In fact, we raised more money and had more individual small dollar donors than any other governor's candidates. In fact, some of those were a biscuit maker at Bojangles that gave us $5. Another one was a mechanic at Goodrich that gave us $25. A stock boy at Walmart that gave us $10. These are the kinds of people that are supporting me and my campaign. Some of the reasons I've already kind of shared with you, but also to kind of get to that question that I know is going to be asked from back in the back, one of the biggest problems that we have in government is lack of transparency. You go through, you just Google ethics in Georgia, transparency in Georgia, and what you're going to see are F's and D minuses all across every single agency or public policy group that dives in that stuff. One of those is because we have unrecorded votes. Josh McCoon, he offered a resolution to change our rules in the Senate so that every single vote would be recorded. We had the rules chairman come up to nearly every single senator. I know he did it to me. And he said, do not support that bill. Do not write your name on that bill. We want Josh to sit up in front of the Rules Committee alone. You know what I did? I'm the only senator that put my name on that bill. You can look it up on senate.ga.gov. It's going to have Josh McCoon as the author. Only the person is Michael Williams. This is when Hunter Hill was in the Senate. He actually sat on the Rules Committee, and you can go back and you can watch a video where Hunter Hill, currently running for governor, voted against Josh McCoon's bill. He voted against bringing transparency to our state. So many things go on underneath the Capitol that will just make your stomach turn. You heard Jeff Duncan talk about the backroom deals, the transportation bill. One of the things that really irritated me this past session was there was a bill for reducing our taxes. Now again, you'll hear a lot of politicians out there, a lot of elected officials say that they've done a great job because they've lowered our state income tax. The first time we've had a decrease in a generation or so. Well, why do we have that decrease? Because Donald Trump passed tax regulation, tax change in DC, and had we not done that, the state of Georgia would have had a humongous windfall of what should have been our money. So all they did was allow us to get the money that the federal government wanted us to get to begin with. But you know what happened in that bill, that transportation bill that passed in 2015? Delta lost their tax exemption on fuel tax. And their lobbyists have been looking for something to get that back for 3 years. Well, you know what? They found something. What Republican is going to vote against a tax decrease? So these lobbyists, they convinced leadership to put this tax exemption in that tax bill. Casey Cagle was trying to fast track it. He wanted us to suspend the rules in the Senate so that we can get to the vote quicker. I actually objected to that. We were able to kind of stop it in time for Delta to come out and, the whole thing where they just said that we're not going to honor the NRA endorsement yet. I'm thankful for that because I was trying to fight this. Didn't really have much support with it. It was a crony capitalism. A lot of reasons I didn't like it, but then Delta came out and they did that. We were able to kind of gut that out. But what really aggravated me was I was in a finance committee, and me and another senator by the name of Bill Heath, we were trying to get that out the Friday before Delta made that announcement. And the chairman of the finance committee, as we were proposing this amendment to take out that tax exemption for Delta, he pretty much said he's not going to allow the amendment because the parties have already agreed to what is in the bill. Think about that for a minute. The parties had already agreed. We were in the finance committee where bills are supposed to be perfected. He would not allow an amendment because the parties had already agreed. Basically, there were backroom deals that were already agreed upon that wanted Delta to have this exemption. It is those type of things that we have to eliminate from our state government. And the only way we can do that is to shine a light, to bring transparency to what really goes on down there. Also, illegal immigration. I know we'll have the question about illegal immigration. Yes, it's a federal issue, but there are things that we can do here in this state to take a very progressive and an active stance. One is to defund sanctuary cities. That's kind of a no-brainer. The other one, though, is it's called the 287G program. The question was asked about would we honor ICE requests to detain a prisoner? Well, we can actually go a step further than that. We can have our sheriff's departments become what's called 287G compatible, where basically they act as ICE. So if there's a detainer from ICE, they don't have to wait for ICE. They can begin the deportation process immediately. There's only about 4 counties currently in the state that are 287G compliant. I want every single one of our counties to become 287G compliant so that once we identify somebody that is here in our country illegally, we can begin the process immediately and not have to wait for the federal government. Taxes, again, I'm a CPA. I've actually been diving into our budgets, our financial reports, our audits. We've seen our budget go from $15 billion to $26 billion in 8 years. That's a 73% increase. Have anybody in this room had a 73% increase in their income in the past 8 years? I've met one person. They were unemployed, now they're employed. So it's a humongous increase. But the state of Georgia, we've had a 73% increase. What are they doing with that money? We had a 73% increase in education. Have we had a 73% increase in our infrastructure, in our roads? No, we haven't had a 73% increase in anything outside of waste, maybe. Because again, I've been able to go in and identify specific areas where we are losing money. I'm not talking about like we make an investment, we lose it. We literally are losing it. The Department of Corrections, they spent $33 million. They booked into an account called Construction in Progress. Audit comes in and says, where's this asset? Where's this construction in process? They don't know where it is. They don't know they can't point to anything. Then audit says, okay, where are the invoices? Where'd the money go? They can't produce any paperwork to show where that $33 million went. It just ups and vanishes. That's a problem to me. But an even bigger problem is that no one was held accountable. You want to change government, you want to change what's going on, we have to start holding people accountable. Not just elected officials, but bureaucrats as well that are running several of these agencies. The Department of Community Services, they transferred $115 million of Medicaid to the Department of Community Health. Department of Community Health, they only received about 105. Where'd $10 million go? Stuff like this is happening all the time in our state. We can eliminate our state income tax if we had better controls over where our money's going. And also, who wants offshore drilling? I know I do. The Republicans have wanted offshore drilling for what, 30 years, ever since Reagan was in office? We now have an opportunity to do that. Texas, they don't have a state income tax. The big part of that is because of the oil and gas industry. Florida doesn't want offshore drilling. Some of the states far north are kind of finding it. We can embrace offshore drilling. Let's protect our coast. We have a bunch of beautiful beaches. Let's protect it, but also let's embrace offshore drilling. There's several other industries that we can embrace so we can reduce our state income tax and eventually eliminate it as we transition over to a fair tax model. And again, I can keep talking about policy. What questions do you guys have? Any? Yes, sir.
I'm a college student at KSU. We actually met when you talked about Republicans. I have a friend who's now transferring schools because of being persecuted by a professor. What would you think about adding cameras onto classrooms to hold these professors accountable?
I think that's a great idea, and I think the way that we could sell it is through online classes so that you can actually have students enroll in your class and watch and participate through online with a camera. So I think there's a way to sell that. Also, talking about education, now we talked a little bit about hope and hope in higher education. There's actually been a couple bills I introduced. One to freeze tuition costs. Again, we talked about the increase in tuition. Let's freeze it for those that are starting, so that whenever you start school, you know what you're going to have to pay until you graduate. Also, the Hope Scholarship Program. By law, the lottery funds it, and they're supposed to spend 35% of their proceeds on education. Currently, only about 23% is being spent. That's $480 million that is not being spent on education that's supposed to be. That would stop with me being governor as well. Yes, ma'am.
Well, I'm also a graduate student at KSU, and I just had a follow-up question
Sure.
on that. I just want to make sure I understood this. You would propose to put cameras in every classroom to monitor the content.
Again, you couldn't sell it that way. Yeah, you couldn't sell it that way.
No, obviously you couldn't
Yeah,
sell it.
yeah, you couldn't sell it that way. But again, if we have somebody,
to address that
yeah,
concern.
well, yeah, if we have somebody that's concerned about being persecuted, because we all know that there is a lot of liberal things happening inside our colleges. They're not going to want monitoring, but yet a way that you can push that, a way that you can encourage that is online learning. That's a huge opportunity, and why not have a camera in there that live streams it to people that want to learn whatever class you're doing online and expand your footprint online.
Well, because doesn't that violate the ability of students to engage in free speech without feeling that they're going to be recorded for what they've said when they were 18 years old trying to learn about different political realities? I mean, I'm just trying to make sure that I'm understanding, because I've also gone to KSU and I don't feel that there's any persecution there. Because I was a president of multiple Christian organizations there. So I just want to make sure I'm clear on this, where you stand with the free speech in public universities, where there are liberal students there that also pay tuition.
Yeah. What is wrong with having something you said? I don't understand.
Well,
if it's being recorded, if it's being live streamed. So do you not want universities to expand online and have their classes being taught all across the globe if they have the ability to do
They
that?
have online education, but if you look into the data of it, students don't learn as well online.
So you want to eliminate online education?
No, I'm saying, why would you want to put a camera in the classroom for the specific purpose of monitoring?
Again, I'm not saying
political
specific person,
ideologies
for a purpose.
Are posed in that classroom
Yeah.
by 18-year-old students.
I'm not saying that for the sole purpose of that. What I'm saying is there's a way to accomplish what he has a concern with, and fitting a business case model to do that.
But I'm saying I don't understand how you would do that model, or even how you would pay for it,
There are already models that exist where you have a teacher that is teaching a class and it's being live streamed to students that are watching it online. That's being done right now.
Yes, but those are online classes. I'm saying.
I know, let's make classes online.
Well, there are already classes online that students want to take classes.
So then you agree, online learning is okay.
I'm saying there are online classes, but I'm
Yeah.
saying I don't agree with the context of because one student feels persecuted by a professor that our public institutions that are taxpayer funded should put in cameras to record professors to make sure that they're not indoctrinating students with liberal ideology.
Yes, I understand what you're saying, and I understand that that would never pass. I get that.
I didn't say it was going to pass. I just want to know if that's something you're saying you support.
No, I support, what I support is finding solutions to problems. Like he has a concern, he has an issue. There is a way to solve that through a business model. There's a way to solve that through other ways as opposed to just saying what you said. There's solutions. One of the biggest things that's going on in our country right now is we have opposite ends of the spectrum that are fighting each other. And what she is doing right there, she's trying to say, you want to do this because somebody is scared of being persecuted, or somebody is scared of this. That might be the origins of his concern, but there are solutions out there if we can just sit down and talk about it. She also agrees that we have online learning. We can sit down and we can learn through watching professors teach. Now again, do we need to eliminate online learning because that might record somebody persecuting a teacher? No, but there's a way that we can sit down and actually talk about the real issues without trying to pigeonhole somebody into a specific stance. Yes, sir.
I want to bail you out by asking an even harder question.
Sure.
Can you explain to us why you voted for HB 170, which was the largest tax increase in recent memory?
Yeah. My first session down at the Capitol was 2015. And again, I had absolutely no political experience whatsoever. I was down there, I was trying to learn the process, and what was going on was this talk about increasing the gas tax. There's several reasons why we needed to change the gas tax model. It was a sales tax, it was I forget the other term, but basically different ways to tax gas. There was myself, Bill Heath, Josh McCoon, several other conservatives that had seen our budget exploding. And we wanted to actually take the money from the increases in our budget to spend it on gas. The bill passes the House, comes over to the Senate, we're talking about it, and in one of our caucus meetings, leadership says, look, we can't address both issues. We can't do tax reform and fund transportation in one session. Let's talk about tax reform next year. So they put into the bill this a study committee that said that we would look at tax reform over the summer and then come back next session. I believed them. You can say shame on me for believing that. I had to learn something that took Ronald Reagan learning with Tip O'Neill. You really can't trust Democrats and rhinos when it comes to tax reform. I trusted them. I voted for it, and it never happened. What you will see, though, is my record, my voting record. The first year I was down there was the worst it's ever been. I've actually learned what happens down there. I've learned the process. And in the past 3 years, I've actually been voted or been identified by Americans for Prosperity as well as American Conservative Union as the most conservative senator, not just last year, but my lifetime record, which includes that vote as well. So it was a learning process for me, and ever since then, I have basically not trusted leadership when they say they're going to lower taxes.
Sir, as a CPA, did you have any experiences or got information that the DOR, Department of Revenue, is sending out letters going back 10 years to access, audit, pay my fines, letters? They're going back 10 years.
10 years, and to citizens, to businesses, for
Yeah, no,
back taxes from 10 years ago?
Yeah.
I was not aware of that. Have you received one of those?
No,
Did you know somebody that has?
I'm a tax preparer, and I have clients with their 2008 letters.
Okay. Yeah, I'm not aware of that. But again, there should be statute of limitation issues that go along with that. But one of the things with the Department of Revenue that I think is a major issue, our local communities, they don't know who is paying sales tax and how much all the sales tax is being paid to the Department of Revenue, and all the local communities get is a check, basically a wire transfer, every single month to their bank account with no remittance devices. They don't know where the money's coming from. So as a local community, you might have a business that opens up, and you would have no way to know if they're paying sales tax or not. We need to be able to allow the locals, like the counties and the cities, to get that information so that they can help to monitor sales tax collections. Any other questions?
No, it's good.
All right, thank you. Anything else? All right, well, thank you so much. We'll hang out a little bit longer if you have questions. I appreciate it.